What's going on, guys? Jake Peffer here. Welcome back to Jake's Cinema Room. Today I'm back with another movie review for you with Rebel Moon Part 1 coming out back in December. I didn't get a chance to check it out, so with the now Part 2 coming out this weekend, I decided to take a look at both Part 1 and Part 2, and this is going to be a full review of both entries in this new Zack Snyder movie. So yeah, Rebel Moon, wow. Got a lot of thoughts on these two movies, and realistically, I'm just going to talk about them as one because they are really one really long movie. But for some reason, old Snyder decided to split them both up and make this some kind of big epic for Netflix, and unfortunately, that's not really what this is. So with Rebel Moon, you have a group of people that live on a moon. Yeah, and they're farmers, they harvest and all this kind of stuff, and they are eventually infiltrated by a regime that's bad, and they basically want them to give all their harvest over to them at the end of the season. And it's actually very similar to the plot line of A Bug's Life, which I didn't really expect from this movie. So you have that going on, and in this particular group, there's a woman who is a secret warrior of sorts named Cora, and she elects to defend this whole entire group of people from this regime that's trying to take over and take away all their crops and harvests and everything like that. So she sets out on a journey to recruit other warriors from other planets and moons and whatnot to help her and defend this group of people and take on this regime, destroy it, and allow these people to live in peace. And yeah, that's more or less, it's a pretty straightforward movie overall. And with Part 1 and Part 2, essentially what you have is Part 1 is the setup. It's them going out and trying to locate all these different warriors. We get a little bit of a backstory between each one of them. It all culminates into eventually a pretty big action scene toward the end that kind of sets up Part 2. And then Part 2 is a long hour of kind of nothing going on, and then an hour of a big action sequence. And yeah, and with it being Zack Snyder, I'm not going to try to dog on him this entire review, but a lot of the faults of this movie do fall on his shoulders. He's a director, writer. This is definitely a piece from him that just, it feels like, hey, this is a movie I really wanted to do for a long time. Netflix is giving me all this money, so now this is my passion project. I'm going to go out and make this movie I've always wanted to make. And unfortunately, it's just not a very well put together movie. And Snyder's a director that, I'm sorry, I'm just not a big fan of. There's a couple movies in his filmography that I have not seen, but I've seen the majority of his movies, and I still stand firmly that he has only made one good movie. That was his first movie. His Dawn of the Dead remake I actually really like. And then everything since then has been a steady decline, one after another, of just movies that I've just not been a big fan of. It's a lot of action sequences that don't really amount to much. It's a lot of slow motion, and boy, does Rebel Moon take the cake when it comes to slow motion. I thought Watchmen and 300 and most of his other movies had a lot of slow-mo, but wow. Rebel Moon definitely puts a new perspective on his use of slow motion, to the point where there's so many scenes where there's not even any action happening and there's slow-mo, and it's just like, why is this here? Why do we have so many sequences where there's just slow motion of people harvesting crops or dropping grains of rice, or just like not even doing anything in an action sequence? Like, at least in an action sequence it kind of makes sense, but even there it gets tiresome after a while. And that's the other part of this thing, is both of these movies, for there to be these big action, sci-fi action movies and whatnot, they are so boring. It took a lot from me to hold my attention between both parts of these movies. And it's a shame because, it could be something good. Everybody wrote this off as essentially a ripoff of Star Wars, and there's a lot of similarities to Star Wars as well as other sci-fi action movies and whatnot. And this is a movie that it takes a lot of good ideas from other things and then executes them poorly. And it doesn't help that you have a guy behind the camera who just he wants things his way, and when it comes out on the screen, it just doesn't work all that well. Not to mention you have a cast here of people who range from some pretty good actors, like some actually really good actors, all the way down to people who have no business acting in anything. And it doesn't help that there is a director here who just doesn't really know how to direct his actors. You have people like Jaimin Hansu, who is an amazing actor, and here he's just, he's not really given anything to do, especially in the first part. Part two, he gets a little bit more going on, and, it's kind of whatever, but you have him, you had Ed Skrein, who, is trying to do something here with his character. He plays the villain in both parts, and he's at least trying to do something, but his character is just completely uninteresting, and it's just like, why would I really care? Another actor I like, Charlie Hunnam, from Sons of Anarchy. He's been in a ton of stuff. He's a really good actor, and here, he's kind of wasted. He's doing this horrible Irish accent for no reason, but he at least, even though he's really not doing anything throughout these, it at least feels like there's something there because he has, a bit of charisma, and he definitely has a presence on screen, which leads me to the lead of these movies, Sofia Boutella. Hope I'm saying that right. There's a couple, I looked up her filmography. There's a couple movies I've seen with her, and I do not remember her in them at all. So that goes to show, how not good of an actress she is. And I hate to put her down or anything like that, but she has absolutely no charisma, and how she got to be the lead in these movies is beyond me. There's nothing interesting about her at all, and for her to lead the charge of this group and everything, it's just like, man, you could have got a much better actress to be this role, and the movie may have been a little bit better, had there been someone who had a stronger presence on screen. You could have maybe had a little bit of something here, but the fact you have her for 4 hours, trying to lead these two movies, oh my God, it's so overbearing. And, like I said, with her having a director that just doesn't really do well when it comes to directing actors, it's a lose-lose in this situation, And like I said, even with, somewhat good actors or better actors that show up in this movie, they're just not given anything to do, and it sucks because you have her. You also have Ray Fisher, who he was Cyborg in the Justice League movie. Man, that guy is awful. When he shows up here, whoo boy, he is terrible. And I thought he was okay as Cyborg. He was in that movie. He really wasn't given a whole lot to do either. Both cuts of that movie, if you want to talk about the two different cuts of a movie, whatever. But yeah, he's terrible here too, and it's just a shame, man. Like, it's, this movie probably could have been something halfway decent, and it's just the execution of it by pretty much everybody involved makes both parts absolutely unwatchable. They are terrible. And like I said, I'm not a big fan of Snyder in the first place, but this might be his worst movie or movies. I would put them down at the bottom with Sucker Punch. Like, Sucker Punch is one of the worst movies of his that I've seen by far, and this is right down there with it. It might be worse, possibly. I haven't seen Sucker Punch in a little while, but that was one that, really just kind of made me mad. Like, it was like, what am I watching here? This is terrible. And that's how I felt watching both parts of Rebel Moon. I kind of wish I would have watched the first part back when it came out, because watching them back to back is a 4-hour block that is just awful. And it took me some time to watch both of these. Like, it wasn't one sitting that I watched both of these. I definitely had to take a couple times to get through them, because, wow, they are just not interesting at all. Two of the most boring sci-fi action movies I've ever seen in my life. And I hate to say it, but I definitely do not recommend either of these movies. If you're a completionist, you have to see every movie that Zack Snyder's ever made. Watch this. You may enjoy it. It's got everything he does in all of his other movies. So if you are a fan of his, you might come out liking this because it does everything that he does in every other movie. But to me, it does all that, and it's worse somehow. But that's really it for me. If I had to say one part is better than the other, I honestly don't know if I could. They're both basically the same. At least the first one kind of has the setup, of introducing the characters that are going to be on this journey and giving them a little bit of a backstory, but not really. So you kind of have that going for it, where the second one is just this long hour where you think the second one's just going to be straight action the entire time, which it doesn't necessarily need to be, because the second hour of the movie is all action and it's so boring and who could care less. But you have this whole hour before it where they're just really not doing anything, and it's like, why are we here? Why are we watching this? This is so stupid. So I guess I would give the first one the edge between the two, but overall, man, I'm giving these a 3 out of 10. Like, both of them, flat out terrible. Don't recommend them at all, like I said, unless you are a huge Snyder fan and you really just need to watch them. But yeah, that's about it for me, guys. If you have seen Rebel Moon Part 1 or Part 2 or both, please let me know what you thought about them in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more reviews, rankings, all that kind of good stuff. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or X, and Instagram. I also have a TikTok as well if you want to follow me there too. I'll put all the links down below. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.